Our nation's capital is regularly referred to as the swamp, both for the hot and humid conditions along the Potomac River that prevail there, but also for some of the people who barter and sell, amass, and wield power there. As we think about the swamp and all the problems in it, we often hear that we should drain it. But maybe it's time to think again about what we think we know about the swamp and find some of the lessons there that might be helpful to all of us as we cast votes in 2024. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, we do often refer to our nation's capital as the swamp, where all of those lovely things happen. And it is hot and it is sweltering, especially in the summer. If you've ever been there in the summer, it is exhausting. It's exasperating. There are tens of thousands of people on the National Mall. There's a lot to complain about. And yet, there's always lessons to be learned there. There's all kinds of amazing people to meet. There's a lot of surprising lessons to be learned as well. Now, often when we go to our nation's capital, the angst and frustration that looms over the capital city is often palpable. The partisan divide is always evident. The instant certainty with which political operatives and partisans, lobbyists, social media influencers spew their interpretations of what a particular politician or political party did say or didn't say, and what that might mean to the current administration or those running for president this cycle or members of Congress. The interesting and fascinating thing to me is that it's noticeable by its absence in all that contempt-fueled political rhetoric is any reference to what these seemingly endless political battles actually mean, or what they could possibly do, or the impact they could have on the American people or people around the world. And I confess, it's not too hard to buy into the mood and become a little bit mired in the malaise and flustered and frustrated with all the things that are wrong in our nation's capital. But I've also found this magic secret. I have found that simply walking out of the United States Capitol onto the National Mall changes everything. Because very few of the tourists there are focused on or even aware of the partisan battles raging on Capitol Hill. They're focused on other things. Things that I call the positive lessons from the swamp. So in the midst of such summers in the swamp of D.C., I have seen thousands and thousands of people from all around the world coming to this awful, hot, humid place. Visitors from Taiwan and South Africa, the nations of Europe, South America, and from every single state in the Union. And the people clearly don't go to Washington, D.C. for the weather. They don't even come to see the members of Congress. They don't come for the food. And they don't even come for our historic buildings, which by comparison to those in Asia or Europe, they're not really all that old. And some are not even that impressive. And so I've often asked myself, why is it? Why do millions of people every year come to Washington? And they not only come, they walk around in the sweltering swamp in a kind of quiet reverence, speaking in hushed tones, with eyes filled of wonder and awe. And the answer, of course, is that the people come because this patch of swamp on the Potomac is a place where the principles of freedom, of liberty, and opportunity loom really large. And people come just for the chance to experience those principles for themselves, or to ensure that their children or grandchildren know why this place and this nation matter. As you know, I love to be surprised, and the swamp always surprises me. I always learn something whenever I visit, and usually it's from very unexpected places and unexpected people. In fact, I remember one time going to Washington, D.C. for meetings of the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce. It included White House briefings on trade and immigration issues. The focus of the meetings was really about finding common ground and solutions that would bless the lives of the citizens of both countries. And the evening I was there, I went to a dinner honoring some of these leaders from Mexico and from America that had been good neighbors in promoting peace and prosperity, understanding and cooperation. And here's where it got surprising. Interestingly and very instructively, the dinner began with a Jewish rabbi offering a thought and a prayer. The rabbi quoted Simeon ben Zoma, who asked and answered, "Who is wise? One who learns from all people. Who is strong? One who conquers his negative inclination. Who is rich? One who is happy with what he has. Who is honorable? One who honors all of mankind. Now, these are clearly messages consistent with the principles that founded this nation. Messages from the swamp come in many forms, but I'm telling you, I would not have guessed I would have learned such wisdom from a Jewish rabbi while attending a U.S.-Mexico business meeting. I came away thinking, if members of Congress, their staff, the media, and others who work in our capital, if they would just think about those principles and apply them, that would actually drain the swamp in a pretty fast way. So here's the think again moment for you today. As we get into this 2024 political season, as it gets into hyperdrive, and most importantly, as you start to try to learn about and listen to those who are seeking your vote for office, local city officials, state legislators, governors, members of Congress, and even President of the United States, I want you to consider these swamp draining principles. So who is wise? One who learns from all people. So ask yourself, does this candidate learn from others? Do they possess radical curiosity? Are they willing to ask great questions and really listen, especially to those they disagree with? Are they willing to learn from others, even if they have to admit that awful, terrible, horrible thing that they were wrong? Wisdom in leadership comes from not only deploying 2 ears, but also possessing a listening and a learning heart. Second, who is strong? One who conquers his negative inclination. So as you look at candidates, ask yourself, does this candidate demonstrate and show restraint in their words and actions? As I often say, just because you can say something doesn't mean you should. Just because you can do something because you have the power doesn't mean you should. And just as with military weapons, the greatest power is not that you have them, it's the restraint to not use them. And leaders usually don't fail for lack of talent or ability. They fail because of their weaknesses. Those negative inclinations become the dominant force in their behavior. Number 3, who is rich? One who is happy with what he has. This is important. As you look at candidates, ask yourself, is this candidate content to do the job they are running for, or are they looking for whatever is the next step in their climb to power or their drive to amass fame and fortune? Sadly, far too many are more interested in popularity and power than they are in governing and doing the job they were elected to do. And if a politician is spending their time obsessed with social media likes and clicks and national TV appearances and fundraising, they may make themselves wealthy, but there's no chance they're going to create the true riches of stronger citizens and better, happier communities. And 4, who is honorable? One who honors all of mankind. So as you look at candidates, ask yourself, how does this candidate talk about others, including their opponents and those they disagree with? Do they talk about those who are struggling in society as liabilities to be managed or as human beings filled with infinite, even divine potential to be nurtured? Do they respect those who have sacrificed to serve, those who have gone before, and those who are not in the room to defend themselves? Does the candidate inspire the best that is within each citizen or play to the negative base emotions of anger and angst, fear and frustration, contempt and caustic hate? Honoring all of mankind includes those who look and live, believe, and behave differently than we do. In our pluralistic society, oneness and unity does not mean sameness, and that should be celebrated and honored by those seeking office. So, from now until Election Day on the first Tuesday of November, we're going to hear countless politicians from across the political spectrum invoke a promise to drain the swamp. And yes, it would be wonderful if we could drain the swamp of those who put personal power or profit ahead of principles and good public policy. Draining the power brokers and influence peddlers, I think, would do wonders. And while such promises are easily made, and they do make for great applause lines and bumper stickers for political campaigns, to this point, they've really done nothing to transform the broken elements of our political process. So perhaps rather than draining the D.C. swamp, we should simply reinfuse it with the very principles that are chiseled in granite in every monument and marbled hallway on the National Mall. Now, despite all of our faults and failings as a nation in our politics, our rhetoric, and behavior, the principles found and infused in Washington still ring out. They still ring true as freedom's last best hope on earth. The nation's capital is, at its best, a place for people of all ages and from every land to experience principles and the hope for freedom that naturally burns in every human heart. The swamp still matters and has meaning, not because of the people who worked there or the power deployed there, but because of the principles that are enshrined there. And it matters for the millions who flocked there from the four corners of the earth just for the opportunity to see and feel and experience it for themselves. So yes, we'll complain about all the negative aspects of the swamp, but there are some lessons in there. More importantly, there's some crucial questions for all of us to ask of every candidate for every office who wants our vote. And more importantly, they're questions that we ought to ask ourselves when we look in the mirror every morning. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Pumpkin spice, anyone? Autumn can mean tasty lattes, sure, but also BYU football, colder weather, and how about a little presidential election?
Rock the vote!
For all the spice you need this fall. Start with Tim and Amanda, mornings from 5 to 9. Then David DeGenovic, Boyd Matheson, and Jeff Kaplan's afternoon news as you drive home. Coming this fall on KSL News Radio.
Introducing Peach Doors and Windows. Are you ready to upgrade your home with stunning new windows but are overwhelmed with how to begin? Look no further than Peach Windows. You know at Peach, they are all about giving you options. Peach offers a wide selection of wood windows, sleek modern black metal frames, European tilt and turn windows, plus much, much more. It's not just about looks, it's about durability and security to protect what matters most. Let them help you find the perfect match for your home, budget, and personal style. Visit their showroom and see for yourself. No pushy sales tactics, only guidance from their experienced staff. No inflated markups just to offer so-called discounts. See their 5-star reviews where customers rate them on their attention to detail through every step of the sale and installation process. Amazing home transformations begin with windows and doors. Serving Logan to St. George, just Google Peach Building to see for yourself.
Did you know your skin is the largest organ of your body? Huh? That's why you should shower with Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash instead of plain old bar soap. Love your skin by super hydrating it with vitamin B3 and glorious notes of vanilla and shea. Did you know that my super hydrated skin is the second largest organ of my body? The first is my heart. Old Spice. Men have skin too. Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash. 24/7 renewing moisture. With daily use.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds, which could be life-changing. I mean, you could put that money towards concert tickets for your daughter to see that singer who sings about painful breakups. And one song will inspire your little beauty to break up with that beast she's dating, Brian. Instead, she'll date someone who's nice and worthy of her love, not someone who addresses you and your spouse as bro. And it's all because you could save money switching at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states.
Emergency traffic on KSL News Radio brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. We have a mess on northbound I-15 right in the heart of the city. A crash with possible injuries prior to 2100 South, blocking all but the far right lane of travel. Now, you can take that exit ramp to get to I-80 as well as 2100 South. But if you're on the main flow, you only have a right lane open to all traffic. And right now we have delays solid back to 4500 South. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues? Who are you? Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Give the star in your life the brightest gift in the world. Name a star after them.
This is Rocky Moselle with International Star Registry. For $59 and a call to 800-282-3333 or visit starregistry.com, you can name a star for birthdays, weddings, or even memorials. Over 45 years, we have named millions of stars for celebrities and individuals from around the world. The star you name will be recorded in book form in the U.S. Copyright Office. Visit starregistry.com or call 800-282-3333.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Heather Peterson. First, a military court in Congo is sentencing 37 people to death, including 2 Utahns who were convicted for their involvement in a coup attempt. Second, UDOT is now working on what they describe as a once-in-a-lifetime upgrade on 2 roads in far southeastern Utah. And third, the Boar's Head cold cuts behind a listeria outbreak earlier this year are now being discontinued. Right now it's 70 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources. Inside Sources, an inside look at 2024 presidential politics.
Must be Friday. It's time for the Inside Sources inside look at presidential politics, trying to get you beyond some of the headlines of the week, resetting and reframing where we are in the campaign as we march our way towards the first Tuesday of November. So as we take a look this week, of course, another interesting set of dynamics, a big presidential debate this week, and it may be the only one as things move forward, other than the vice presidential debate, which still seems to be on the books. So the question then becomes, how did this debate affect latest polling numbers in the race? What do you need to pay attention to moving forward? What are we going to be watching for over the weekend? It's obviously going to be a close contest, and in a game of inches, voter turnout is going to be a huge factor that can tip things in your direction. Also, it's interesting in terms of the approach to voter turnout. It's one of the hardest things to predict on an election day, but we'll take a look at what each campaign is doing. How they're going about it is vastly different, so we'll take a look at that. Interestingly, following the debate, which the overwhelming majority of analysts have agreed that if for no other reason than the looks and the dynamics of it, Kamala Harris cleared all the bars and all the hurdles that were set and clearly came out, I think, as the winner of the debate. Now, does it change the dynamic? That I'm less convinced of. She didn't get to a lot of specifics and a lot of policy, so I don't think she did a whole lot to deal with those independent voters. She definitely shored up her base, kept the excitement rolling there. For his part, former President Trump was very much into old school model in terms of his approach to this. Also not a lot of specifics on a whole lot of things. And a lot of meandering, a lot of grievance, a lot of backward-facing pieces. And so with that wind at the back, there was immediately a lot of questions about, well, what comes next? Will there be a second debate? The Harris campaign, feeling very good about the first round, immediately said they're in. They want to debate. Yesterday, former President Trump made an announcement that he would not be interested in doing another debate, saying he won the last one and he's good.
Kamala should focus on what she should have done during the last almost 4-year period. So because we've done 2 debates and because they were successful, there will be no third debate.
Now, that's a really interesting thing. He did frame there the one element that he probably should have focused on during the debate. And that is taking a look at what has taken place over the last 3.5 years. All the experts on both sides of the aisle say, look, that's his strongest argument is in terms of how people feel, how they felt about the economy and jobs and their family's security and future 4 years ago as opposed to where they are now. He spoke of that very little during the debate, but he did mention it in saying he won't debate again. So that's an interesting thing. There are some splits even among the Republicans. Senate GOP leader John Thune gave an interview and weighed in on the debate, saying he thought that the former president should take another crack at it. Of course, John Thune is one of those jockeying for position to become the Republican leader in the Senate. Now, whether that's the majority or the minority leader, we won't know that until the first Tuesday. He joined us on Inside Sources not too long ago when he was here in the state of Utah. He's a good communication thinker, and here's how he answered a question relating to former President Trump's performance and a future debate with Vice President Harris.
Yes, I do. I mean, I think it'd be helpful. This time around had fairly low expectations set for her performance and arguably perhaps overperformed. But I think now they've had that first round. I think it's really important because I don't think they got enough into the substance of their differences. And I think elections are always about differences. The contrast this time around couldn't be more clear in terms of their records, their positions, their vision for the future. And I think litigating that in a debate setting would be really important, and I don't think they got enough of that done last night. So I hope there's another debate, yeah.
That may have been the best analysis of all, coming from John Thune, Republican senator, again, one who's likely to be in the leadership role come 2025. And so I think it is interesting. Neither side really got into much of the substance, and that seems to sadly have become the way we do debates these days, is we don't really get into the substance and the specifics. I would love to see a debate where Vice President Harris spends no time talking to or about former President Trump. I think about 82% of her words during the 1 hour, 46-minute debate were about or directed directly to former President Trump. And I get that from a strategy standpoint, from a debate tactics standpoint. I get it. And you can do that and win an election, but it doesn't mean you get to lead. You lead with vision, and you lead with a specific vision of where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. For former President Trump's standpoint, yeah, he should do another debate, and he should not worry about anything that's in the past. He should not be focused on conspiracy theories and sidebar conversations and personal put-downs, and should just focus on what went right and what he's going to do to make things better. That would be a radical thing, and sadly that's going to require some transformation in the way we do debates. There's been a lot of argument this week about the moderators. And as we often say, if you're complaining about the rules or the referees, you're probably losing. So I think part of the complaining about the moderators was one thing. But here's what I would like to see. So you did have some things that didn't appear to be quite even in terms of pushing back against candidates' answers. There was a lot of on-the-spot fact-checking with former President Trump. No real pushback on things or plans or lack of plans on the part of the vice president. So what I would suggest, if you're going to be a moderator, if you are going to insert yourself into the middle of it, then do it and force them to actually answer the question. I went back through the entire debate. Yes, I went back through the entire debate. Not a single response from either of the candidates began by directly addressing the question that was asked. Zero. Zero for the night. If you're looking at batting average, it's zero. They got nothing. They all started with either a personal put down or a circuitous route to get to an answer or a dodge of what the real question was. So no one clarified their position. No one specified what they would actually do. And so if you're going to be the moderator and if you're going to assert yourself into the debate, which is always debatable, at least do it in the right way. If they start answering a different question, just stop them. If you want to talk about cutting the mics, the moment they start talking about something other than the answer to the specific question, then cut it off. You lose your time. You're out. On to the next thing. Because what we really want in our leaders is someone who can actually answer questions, someone who knows where they want to go and need to go, and someone who's looking out actually for the American people, not just talking about it in populist rhetoric that's unhinged from principle or good public policy. It'd be a different kind of debate, to be sure. So if we are going to debate having more debates, let's also debate how we do debates, because I think we can do them a lot better. All right, that wraps it up for our Inside Sources Inside Look at presidential politics this week. We'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to return to a conversation I had with Eric Boehm this week about the psychology of inflation, not just the economics of it. You don't want to miss it. Stick around. We'll be right back.
1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Heather Peterson. KSL's top local story this hour. Sunrise Elementary was briefly put on lockdown earlier today after reports of gunshots nearby. The Sandy Police Department says there was reports of a homeowner firing rounds inside their home at a large dog who was attacking a smaller dog. The lockdown at Sunrise was precautionary and was lifted once they decided there was no threat. Former President Donald Trump will hold a private event at the Salt Lake City International Airport tomorrow night. Invitations show people will need to pay several $1,000s to get in and even more to get a photo with the former president.
Wish he would hold a rally here and see what kind of attention it gets and what the mood is like, what the protests are like. We're not going to see any of that in Utah, and that's kind of a shame. I wish he would do something or campaign here a little bit. Kamala Harris has campaigned here a bunch, but again, nothing big, just a couple of Park City events.
KSL at Night host Adam Gardner says the Trump campaign has fallen behind the Harris campaign in fundraising, and the former president is looking to get as much campaign cash as possible heading into these final months. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. 33,000 Boeing workers are on strike today. The workers are angry over a contract dispute and say the proposed pay increase of 25% is a little too late. After all the federal investigations and some high-profile missteps, Boeing executives say a strike will only exacerbate its problems. Your money at this moment, the Dow is up 303 points, the S&P up 28, and the NASDAQ up 107 points. Coming up, huge delays on northbound I-15. You're going to want to take an alternate route. KSL traffic is next. KSL News Time, 1:31.
And now's the perfect time to go into Hercules Credit Union. You can walk into any of their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, or Riverton. Of course, you can always go online at HerculesCU.com because you want to check out their Gold Tier Checking. With Hercules First Federal Credit Union Gold Tier Checking, it's free checking. Let's start with that. And then they have a promotional rate right now of 4.25% interest on the balance in your checking account, not your savings account. This is your checking account earning 4.25% interest. You also earn points every time you use your debit or credit card. You can get up to 3 times points on items like groceries. The points can be used for cash back, for travel, gift cards. You also get free credit monitoring, no monthly fees. It's the perfect way to go. Hercules Credit Union Gold Tier Checking. As I said, check out their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, or Riverton, or just find them online. Hercules Credit Union, HerculesCU.com.
Dan owed an unbelievable amount of money to the IRS.
I got behind on my taxes. It's a horrible feeling.
He was in denial.
And when I got those letters from the IRS, you wanted to act like they didn't exist.
Finally, Dan turned to Optima Tax Relief, the leading tax resolution firm. A-plus rated by the Better Business Bureau, they've resolved over $1 billion for their clients.
Optima got me a settlement with the IRS. These people are really people-friendly. It was every bit of a new lease on life for me.
The fast action and the great results made Dan's head spin.
I felt like I was in a dream, but it's real, and I have paperwork to prove it. They got the job done, and life is good.
For tax help you can trust, call Optima now for a free consultation.
If you're worried about what's going to happen with the IRS, stop worrying. Make the call now.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
This is Derek Overstreet of the New Millennium Group and host of Stop Working and Start Living Radio. If you're close to or in retirement and you don't have a tax plan, call us right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Listen, our country's been spending like never before, and the tax bill is coming soon. If you need an income tax strategy and a financial plan that will get you through the rest of your life, give my team a call, 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. If you want an investment plan that allows you to keep more of your gains and pay less taxes, give us a call, 888-999-6370. My team specializes in the type of plan that will get you retired 3 to 5 years sooner than you thought possible. So, get a no-cost tax analysis by calling 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. My team is standing by now.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
Emergency traffic brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
that we have on northbound I-15. This crash involves multiple vehicles. They do have it moved over to the left, but crews are still blocking a left lane of traffic. Again, this is northbound I-15. It's after 33rd South, but prior to 2100 South. The delays still stretch into Murray at 53rd South. Also, heads up to Tooele County drivers. We have a crash that has closed both directions of 1000 North and 100 East in Tooele, but it is affecting SR 36 Main Street, causing some southbound delays prior to 10th North. Visit Maurice Abravanel Hall for the Utah Symphony's Pops series. Visit utahsymphony.org/pops. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny with highs around 75 today. Then this weekend will be in the mid-80s. Monday has a 60% chance of rain. Right now it's sunny and 72 degrees. I'm Heather Peterson from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
But when it comes to campaigns, we always do refer to the old motto of "it's the economy, stupid." But sometimes we've got to be a little bit smarter about all of this. Inflation is an interesting component to the economics of it all. It's an economic indicator. And it's a powerful force, not just for shaping our wallets, but actually our minds and even our societies. So it's time to think again about what we think we know when it comes to the impact of inflation. Our good friend Eric Boehm, of course, a reporter at Reason, covers economic policy, trade policy, and the elections, and just has a brilliant piece. I've been dying to have this conversation. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Hey, glad to be here, Boyd. Thanks for having me.
All right, so dive into this. We always look at inflation as an economic indicator and that kind of impact. What kind of psychological and social impact does it also have?
Yeah, of course. I mean, inflation is, as everybody is well aware after the last couple of years, it is, the measure of basically how much your money is worth relative to how much it used to be worth. This piece that I wrote for the magazine, it's in the latest edition of the print magazine, is kind of a deep dive into some of the psychological, social consequences that come along with periods of high inflation. And my thesis, my argument in the piece is that, not just, and the headline of the piece is "Inflation breaks our brains." It's not just that inflation makes us poorer, monetarily, but it tends to make people kind of poorer citizens too. Like, it makes everybody just, whether they're aware of it or not, kind of be a bit more on edge. There's, historical trends you can point to here too, various incidents, kind of throughout history where bouts of inflation triggered unrest and revolutions and various types of things. But even when we don't get to something that extreme, I think it just helps explain some of the tightening, I guess, of everybody's kind of sense of politics in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and so I want to really dig in. The thing that caught me in your piece, and again, you can check this out in the print magazine and at reason.com, is that inflation does break us in a lot of ways. It makes us angry. It makes us a little more irrational. But unpack for us this idea that I think is the think again moment, and that is that it makes us poorer economically, obviously, but poorer citizens too. Explain that for us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's, again, if you go back and look at, I opened the piece by talking about a riot that happened in Moscow in 1648 because of a rise in the price of salt. I mean, there's a sort of historical parallels that have been drawn between period of rough inflation in France right before the French Revolution. Obviously, maybe the most famous historical example is the hyperinflation in Weimar Germany that ultimately kind of contributed to the rise of Nazism, the rise of fascism in Europe. I think what to take away from these things is not necessarily that inflation causes people to go crazy or to become Nazis or anything like that, right? But that it just it makes people, I think, more willing to embrace extreme answers to some of the financial problems that they're facing. And I think it also it's that people, look for someone or something to blame, and politicians take advantage of that. And that's, certainly as was the case in Germany most famously. But I think even in less, extreme circumstances, you just have maybe it's immigrants, maybe it's the system. Maybe it's the grocery stores. Maybe it's the politicians themselves. But it just sort of triggers populist sentiments, and I think a kind of like, everybody feels poorer, and you want to know why that is. So there's some stuff we can talk about, some of the psychological studies that have been done too, which I think are interesting. But I think it just makes people more willing to embrace extreme political ideas that maybe they would dismiss when their times are better.
Yeah, and walk us through some of those psychological components, because I do think that's important for us to understand and recognize, both because, as you framed it, it does impact what a lot of politicians are willing to do or say, but it also is how we react and how our neighbors react to what's going on all around us.
Yeah, that's right. So I dove into a recent study from Harvard economist Stephanie Stansheva. She published a paper, I think this was last year, called "Why Do We Dislike Inflation?" It involved interviews with a couple thousand people, and she's just sort of surveying the way people feel about inflation. And she found exactly the thing we were just talking about here, which is that people kind of want to find something to blame. They want to find somebody to blame. It's different for different people. Sometimes it's Joe Biden. Sometimes it's greedy corporations. But you can kind of see that certainly reflected in our politics today. There's a lot of, I think, just trying to find somebody to blame for whatever uncomfortable, financial situation we've gone through in the last few years. And then, I think you combine that with the willingness of politicians. We see this especially on the right, but quite a bit on the left these days too, to try to blame problems on immigration, for example, or on greedy corporations, or on grocery stores, and that's obviously not what causes inflation. It's not immigration that causes inflation. It's not grocery stores that cause inflation. It's the government. It's the fact that you have more money, larger money supply chasing the same amount of goods. That's the sort of thing that's the root cause here. But it's easy to try to direct blame onto other factions. And I guess the other thing I'd add is that other studies that have been done have found that when people do better financially, when you get a pay raise, for example, most of the time people chalk that up to their own performance. People think, this is because I did something that was good and I deserve this money, and this is because of me. And when people lose money, lose a job, when inflation happens and your money is suddenly worth less than it was before, people look for external reasons to blame that rather than internal. And that's just a weird quirk of being human. That's just the way our brains operate. And but I think that contributes to this sentiment too in the culture, which is that something bad happened. Who can I blame for this?
Yeah. And so as we look at how we march forward with all of that, I think it's very interesting how the two political parties and the people at the top of the ticket in particular, how they talk about all of this. And they sort of tend to talk as if the American voters were economists rather than being consumers. They're not economists, and so even the good numbers don't really make a whole lot of sense if you are having a hard time buying groceries or gas or whatever it may be. So walk us through kind of the dynamics of how should we have a different conversation when it comes to what do we actually do to deal with inflation and get it in the right space so that the people can actually flourish.
Yeah. So one of the people that I talked to for the story made the point that the irony of the way people react to inflation is by embracing maybe oftentimes populist policies. And we saw this in the periods of inflation that happened in this country in the 1800s, for example. There were a series of booms and busts, and inflation would happen, and we didn't understand the money supply as well back then, and things were a bit more chaotic. And you would see these like periodic populist movements that would rise, along with periods of inflation. And you've kind of seen that again now in the last few years. Obviously, populism is back on the right and a bit on the left too. But the point that she made to me was that, the irony in all of this is that oftentimes the populist solutions are actually the worst ones if you're trying to get inflation under control.
Yeah.
What you need to do to get inflation under control is you need to constrain spending, you need to constrain the money supply, interest rates need to rise. People don't like it when interest rates go up. That makes people angry too. We view that as kind of like another form of inflation. But that's the thing you got to do. But you end up with, talking about tariffs, talking about anti-monopoly policies, talking about all sorts of other things that oftentimes don't address the root cause and sometimes can actually make the situation worse, can actually make people worse off. So there's like a little bit of a feedback loop there politically.
Yeah.
So it's, maybe you could take away from it that democracies are just not really all that well equipped to deal with inflation. And ultimately, that's the reason, the thing that we need to learn here, the ultimate lesson, don't let inflation happen in the first place. Stay away from the risk of inflation, because once it's out of the bag, it's really difficult to get it back in.
Yeah, and especially love that phrase that the populist solution usually makes it worse. It sounds great. It's a good bumper sticker. It's all of those things. But we'll go all the way back to where you started your article, and any article that can start with a Russian peasant rebellion over salt in 1648 is going to be worth reading. So check that out in Reason Magazine this month. Also, you can see it at Reason.com. Eric Boehm, reporter for Reason, fabulous piece. As always, thanks for helping us think again about what we think we know. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Boyd.
Great perspective from Eric Boehm. We're going to go ahead and step aside for a quick break. Don't go anywhere. More Inside Sources coming up next. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sac Lake City with Advanced Window Products.
And I'm Jake, the other guy. Are your windows old and inefficient and driving up your energy bills?
It's time for an upgrade. Our energy-efficient windows not only look great, but also help you save on your utility bills.
And right now, we're offering an incredible deal. $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more.
That's right, $2,500 in savings to make your home more comfortable and energy efficient.
Plus, we offer a lifetime warranty on all our windows, so you can have peace of mind.
Don't wait. Call us today at 801-850-9100 or visit us at advancedwindows.com to schedule your free estimate. We also offer payment plans as low as $150 a month.
From our factory to your installation in 8 weeks or less. Call us today at 801-850-9100 or visit us at advancedwindows.com to schedule your free estimate.
Advanced Window Products, Utah's window experts.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
We were living in D.C. and we were ready to buy our first house, but it was in Salt Lake City.
I found out through family that the house that my dad grew up in was put on the market.
We had less than 24 hours to put an offer in, and it happened to be on New Year's Eve.
So we immediately contacted our realtor. She was on it from the very beginning. We got the house.
We got the house. Being 2,000 miles away, our realtor really helped us. And there's no way we would have gotten the house if we didn't have our realtor.
Discover how a realtor can make a real difference at myrealtorstory.com.
Did you know your skin is the largest organ of your body? Huh? That's why you should shower with Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash instead of plain old bar soap. Love your skin by super hydrating it with vitamin B3 and glorious notes of vanilla and shea. Did you know that my super hydrated skin is the second largest organ of my body? The first is my heart. Old Spice. Men have skin too. Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash. 24/7 renewing moisture. With daily use.
Welcome to Staples.
Hi, I need a printer for the office.
Staples has the best brands, like HP.
Well, I have some demands.
Oh.
Burton Sales demands it be fast.
HP's Office Jet Pro is super fast.
Megan Marketing demands color prints.
Check.
And Kurt the Controller demands I don't overpay.
With Staples hot deals, you get up to 40% off select HP printers.
Oh, great. My job can be...
demanding?
I was gonna say a lot of fun.
Right now at Staples, save up to 40% on select HP printers, America's most trusted printer brand. Ends 9/28.
The Utah RV Super Show, the premier RV event of the year, is back at the Mountain America Expo Center, Thursday, September 12th through Sunday, September 15th. Come see new 2025 models and special closeout pricing on all 2024 models. Bring a can of food for the Utah Food Bank and get $1 off per can, up to half off adult admission. Unplug from distractions and plug in to your family at the Utah RV Super Show. Discount passes at UtahRVSupershow.com.
Any Hour Services free furnace sale is going on right now. If you haven't scheduled your free estimate yet, what are you waiting for? Call Any Hour Services today or schedule online at anyhourservices.com.
Dave and Debbie.
It's impossible to digest and consume all of the news that's now coming at us through either social media or through web pages or through the radio. Pick what is most impactful in your life and focus on that. And that's what Dave and I do every single morning. We pick those issues that are most important to our listeners and we boil it down so it's digestible. It's simple to understand.
I think we're trying to find the essence of the story. You know, you can't be an expert on all things, but that doesn't mean you can't be curious and really find out more and educate yourself and learn the complexities of an issue. But I think all of us start at ground zero on everything. Ask questions, show that curiosity.
And then if you need more research, you can always go to KSLNewsRadio.com and learn more.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Heather Peterson. First, a lockdown at Sunrise Elementary in Sandy was quickly lifted after police determined the shots were fired nearby and there was no threat to the school. Second, former President Donald Trump is making a fundraising stop at the Salt Lake City airport tomorrow night. And third, 33,000 Boeing workers went on strike today over a contract dispute. Right now it's 72 and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, it's not news to those of you who regularly listen to this program, but I truly believe that as a nation we are not nearly as divided as we think, or as many would like us to think we are. The message of division and extremism is often pushed on social media. It is propounded by political parties who profit from the division, using wedge issues and fundraising as a way to do that. But we need to look at things differently. And we have another new approach to look at it and how we actually come to recognize across our differences what we actually have in common, but more importantly, how we actually move forward. And there's some very simple processes and strategies and principles that are crucial to all of this. Professor Jamil Zaki is a professor of psychology at Stanford University. He's also the author of a book you need to check out called Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. I love that. And Professor, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive into this. We tend to find that most people think we're far more divided than we actually are. You've been looking at this in a really interesting way as it relates to cognitive behavior therapy. Kind of break us down in terms of what you've been looking at and what you found.
Yeah, well, it's no secret that we are politically divided in this country, and I think we are, in reality, more divided in some ways ideologically than we have been in the past decades. That said, the divisions in our head are much bigger. So there's a bunch of research from the behavioral sciences that finds that if you ask the average person, Democrat or Republican, what the average person they disagree with is like, they have no idea. They think that the average person they disagree with is far more extreme than they really are. They think that that average person is twice as anti-democratic, twice as hateful, and 4 times as violent as they really are. And those distortions in our minds get in the way of finding common ground and moving forward together, in the same way that in depression we have distortions about what we're like and what the world is like that stop us from getting better.
Yeah, I love the example you had. You had a fantastic piece in the Washington Post today. You can check that out at thewashingtonpost.com. That you said that even when our pessimism is misplaced, it creates that cycle of silence and misunderstanding that actually makes things worse. And you compared it to depression. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, well, in depression, a person will come to a bleak conclusion. They'll say, I'm worthless, or nobody likes me. And they're wrong, but that conclusion will drive them, for instance, to avoid other people and become lonelier. So it sort of becomes this toxic, self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, in politics, we do the same thing. In my lab, we found that when people, for instance, believe that folks on the other side don't support democracy, they themselves say, well, I can't support democracy either. I have to follow anti-democratic practices, because it's sort of like an arms race. If the other side is going to attack, I better defend myself right away.
Escalation upon escalation, I think, is how that actually plays out. One of the things I love you do in your lab, and again, this was pointed out in your piece today, is really kind of a form of cognitive exposure therapy, that when you actually expose people to the reality, they can actually make some rational decisions in terms of change.
You're very wise to use this term exposure therapy, right? That's when you basically show somebody something that they're scared of, and they learn through experience that it's actually not that frightening, that they can be in front of a spider and not die, for instance. Well, you can be in front of somebody you disagree with, and you also won't die. So we find that we can present people this information in two ways. One, you just show them the data. So in our lab, when we show people data that the other side actually deeply supports democracy, they are more accurate about the other side, and they're less supportive of anti-democratic practices themselves. In essence, they feel safer moving back to our core shared values of a democratic nation. And you can also expose people to each other through conversation, having them actually get together. And when you do that, they learn that the average person on the other side is nothing like what they fear or imagine.
Yeah. I want to spend just a minute getting into to your book, Hope for Cynics. I want to have you come back and do a deep dive on this. But I love the subtitle, this Science of Human Goodness. We've been talking about the economics of goodness and the power that is when a community doesn't have to spend money on addiction or homelessness, that economic goodness, that economics of goodness has a real power. But give us a little bit about the science of human goodness that you've been looking at.
Well, I think that the part that is most important to me is that it's surprising. So, look, science is never going to tell us whether people in general are kind or cruel, compassionate or callous, good or bad. Those are questions for philosophers and theologians. But it turns out that study after study finds that people are better than we think. So research finds that we underestimate how trustworthy, open-minded, generous, and friendly other people are. And we've been talking about how that gets in the way of political discourse, but it gets in the way of all of our social lives. Yeah. People are lonelier than they need to be because they don't realize how kind the folks around them are. And we find over and over again that the best way to build hope in people is not to lie to them, but to tell them the truth, to give them, again, chances to witness each other's goodness.
Oh, I love that. Hope coming through the truth. We've talked about it in the in the context of both the pessimist and the optimist are irrational, but hope is a virtue that can be developed. And you said by exposing people to the truth, that's the beginning of that, the surprise to all of that. Professor Jamil Zaki, so grateful to have you on the program from Stanford University, author of Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. And Professor, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to having you back and doing an even deeper dive because this is a crucial conversation.
I'd love that. Your insights on this are so on point. You could have been a co-author on this book.
We'll take you up on the sequel. How's that?
That sounds great.
All right, that's my conversation, and an important one. Because it is what's going on between our ears. The division in our heads is way bigger, much greater than the real distance between differing points of view in this country. But when we do decide that I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're evil, and we create that distance, it gets bigger. And we isolate more, we interact less, we have fewer conversations. We do less real research. We isolate in our social media bubble or our echo chamber. And then the things that we thought were divisions become even bigger because it's what's happening in that space between our minds where we think the division is so great. Of course, we love having Jenny Howe on the program, and she uses the same thing in terms of exposure therapy. Exposing to if you have a fear of spiders or snakes or something that you can be in there and it'll be okay. And we often need to do the same thing when it comes to issues, politics, things that we disagree on. A little exposure therapy is a good thing. Having a conversation who looks different, lives different, believes different, behaves different than you do will actually shrink that great divide that's in your head and actually help us build some bridges to build the future we want in reality. That wraps it up for hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. We got a big hour number two looking internationally. You want to stick around for this. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
2:00 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Heather Peterson. KSL's top story this hour is breaking news. The Utah legislature has filed a petition on the ruling of Amendment D. This is the one that would let the legislature alter ballot initiatives after they've been approved. Yesterday, a Utah judge sided against lawmakers, ruling the text of the amendment is deceptive. The Legislative Council has filed an appeal to the state Supreme Court asking the court to reverse yesterday's decision.
Pope Francis urging American voters to choose the lesser of two evils in the upcoming presidential election, since Vice President Harris and former President Trump are both against life, he said, quote, both the one who throws out migrants and the one who kills children, end quote. Francis adding abortion is, quote, murder, and turning migrants away is a sin. You have to vote, and you have to choose the lesser evil, he said. Inez de la Cuetara, ABC News, Rome.
And Utah firefighters are making a lot of progress on the state's wildfires. Utah Fire Info reports the feedlot fire that broke out in Box Elder County earlier this week is now fully contained after burning 600 acres. The South Willow fire, also in Box Elder County, was also contained at 48 acres. Your money at this moment, the Dow is up 297 points, the S&P up 30, NASDAQ up 114. Coming up, delays continue on northbound I-15. KSL traffic is next. KSL News Time 2:01.
Jeff Kaplan. I'm energized by breaking news. First of all, because it's right now, and second of all, because in many cases the audience needs to know. There's no more important service that we can provide, and I find it critically important to get more details to the audience as quickly as possible. There's nothing more energizing than that for me. Not at all. The most important thing we do is breaking news. I am gratified that so many people listen to me every afternoon on KSL, but what they don't know is that there are so many people behind the scenes making it happen, checking on the traffic, answering the phones, making the calls, talking to the newsmakers. They're out in the street, into the field to get the raw information, and then putting it all together so that I can sit in front of a microphone and be a source of information every afternoon. But there are so many people who make it happen. That's what you don't know.
Ride Home with Jeff Kaplan, weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
This is Derek Overstreet of the New Millennium Group and host of Stop Working and Start Living Radio. If you're close to or in retirement and you don't have a tax plan, call us right now, 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Listen, our country's been spending like never before, and the tax bill is coming soon. If you need an income tax strategy and a financial plan that will get you through the rest of your life, give my team a call, 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. If you want an investment plan that allows you to keep more of your gains and pay less taxes, give us a call, 888-999-6370. My team specializes in the type of plan that will get you retired 3 to 5 years sooner than you thought possible. So, get a no-cost tax analysis by calling 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. My team is standing by now.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Emergency traffic brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Crews still working on this crash northbound I-15 prior to 2100 South, even though they do have it moved over to the shoulder. A left lane is still blocked, and we still have heavy delays back to Murray. Also, a KSL traffic trooper reporting debris in the road southbound I-15 just prior to Bangerter Highway, and I can see it is starting to cause some slowing. UDOT construction alert, plan ahead as the westbound ramp from Highway 40 to westbound I-80 in Park City will be closed for up to 21 days beginning this Sunday morning for repaving. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny and cool today with a high of around 75. 85 tomorrow, partly cloudy, and 86 on Sunday. Monday has a 60% chance of rain. Right now it's partly cloudy and 72 degrees. I'm Heather Peterson from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Of course, a lot of presidential election headlines this week on a wide range of topics. As we often do on this program, though, we want to look back at history for some proper perspective. And while history doesn't always repeat itself, it does often rhyme. And even when it's more prose than poetry, there's still a lot of important lessons to be learned. And so let's take a trip back to 1940. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
The 1940 U.S. presidential election marked a pivotal moment in American history, challenging long-held traditions and shaping the nation's role across the globe. We have similar crossroads, of course, here in 2024, and fantastic piece in the Washington Post by Professor H.W. Brands, who's from the University of Texas at Austin. He's the author of America First, Roosevelt versus Lindbergh in the Shadow of War. That's going to be released next week, coming up September 24th. And Professor Brands, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be with you.
So let's start with 1940 and the presidential election. Of course, very unique with Franklin D. Roosevelt, but he also had some interesting, he had less of a challenge from the other political opponent and someone who was a little more famous weighing in on some things. Kind of give us the baseline in terms of what was going on, and then we'll get into the topic of how it impacted America's role in the world.
Sure. So the United States had been through 7.5 years of depression, and that weighed on the American people and on their minds. In the middle of this, Europe seemed to be preparing for a second world war, and Americans during the 1930s said, we don't want to have anything to do with this. Our first try at it didn't turn out well, and we don't want to repeat that mistake. So in the middle of the 1930s, Congress passed a series of laws called neutrality laws, saying that if war breaks out in Europe, the United States will not get involved. Franklin Roosevelt was president at the time, and he has different ideas. He signed the neutrality laws, but he believed that the United States was going to have to get involved. So he was trying to figure out how to ease the United States toward intervention in Europe. When war broke out in September of 1939, one of the most serious debates in American history began, and it was the question of what is America's role in the world? Roosevelt increasingly took the position that the United States needs to be the leader of the world, certainly the leader of the world's democracies. But he was working against this background. Well, the term at the time was isolationism. It was Europe's problems are not our problems. America should keep aloof. The leader of that viewpoint was Charles Lindbergh, he was a celebrity. Well, he's called an aviator. He was kind of that time's equivalent of an astronaut. So he was somebody who had a real keen engineering and scientific mind, but he also was a very celebrated figure, in part because of a great tragedy he and his wife suffered when their infant child was kidnapped and murdered. So that became the crime of the century, the big trial that everybody followed. And so there's these two men square off. Roosevelt trying to push the United States toward intervention, toward taking up this role of leading the free world. And Lindbergh saying, hold on, that's not America's history. That's not America's destiny. And so this debate between the two is the focus of the book that I have just written. And it culminates in the election of 1940 because Roosevelt breaks all tradition in running for a third term. And he takes the war in Europe and the crisis facing the United States in this huge decision as his reason for doing it. So that's the heart of the story.
Yeah, and of course, as that continued to play out, of course, Pearl Harbor happened, and that sort of put the isolationist thing to rest as it relates to World War II. One of the things that I love in your piece, Professor, is saying that, look, everyone who kind of experienced that, they're gone with that greatest generation, those that were there. So we've sort of lost that component to it. But there's so many important things that you raised in terms of, hey, there's still a host of questions that were being asked and answered in 1940 that we might want to go back and revisit today.
Yeah, so you've mentioned something that's really important. As long as the generation that fought World War II was still alive, they were convinced, and with very good reason, that this war was very necessary for the United States to get into. Well, they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
And so we can't count on that memory. And we are in a position, in fact, in this election, 2024, for the first time really since 1940, to have this big debate over what America's role in the world should be. And Joe Biden, who's no longer the nominee, but presumably Kamala Harris, are taking the position the United States needs to maintain this leadership role that it adopted in 1941. And former President Trump is taking a very different position. And there hasn't been an election between 1940 and now where the difference between the two candidates on this major foreign policy issue was so clear, so striking.
Yeah, and I think as you look at that, you had a couple other points in your piece that I just want to make sure we get to. And that is you also talked about the fact that wars do tend to consolidate power. And we've seen that on both sides of the political aisle. Congress seems all too happy to give away their power to the executive branch, and the executive branch is all too happy to take it. And so we have executive orders that are made by one and undone by the next. We have trade policies that are, again, enforced tariffs, and then the next one lifts them. You've got all kinds of different deals that go on that way from kind of an imperial presidency, and that decision-making and debate is crucial.
Yeah, so that's one of the striking things, a striking difference between 1940 and now, because the debate then was really for the benefit of Congress, because everybody knew then that Congress was going to have to decide on war or not.
Yes.
The Constitution says Congress is the body that declares war, and everybody accepted that. Nobody challenged it. But ever since, in fact, the last time Congress officially declared war was immediately in the wake of Pearl Harbor. And presidents have seized control over this decision of whether or not to send American troops into battle. And Congress has acquiesced, and that part of the problem is that we don't get these big and basic debates. And we've made some bad decisions over the last 75 years. Nobody these days would defend the American war in Vietnam, and there aren't many people who are enthusiastic about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, if nothing else, perhaps the debate in 2024 will push things back in a direction. Let's get Congress involved in here. These are the representatives of the people, and the people are the ones who are being asked to really go to war, to send their sons and daughters to war.
It's such a powerful thing, and this is a crucial part of the conversation. And I loved how you summed things up in terms of this real debate, an honest debate, and not just for those who are running for president, but for Congress, for right down to the state and local level. There is a debate to be had about what kind of role we're going to have in our communities and all around the world in terms of America and their role, America's role in the world. And to me, there's
no question about it, because we're going to be the ones who are paying for it.
Yeah, no question. Exactly. And so getting to that part of the program, I think, is so vital. H.W. Brands, professor at the University of Texas at Austin, is the author of a new book just coming out on the 24th of September, America First, Roosevelt versus Lindbergh, which immediately caught my attention and my eye. Roosevelt versus Lindbergh in the Shadow of War. This is a fantastic piece in the Washington Post. You can check that out there. The book goes on sale September 24th. And Professor Brands, thanks so much for joining us. This is a great conversation. We look forward to having you back and staying with the conversation.
Well, I'll look forward to that, too.
All right. That's Professor H.W. Brands from the University of Texas at Austin. And this will be a great read. I can't wait to dive into this one because it's so interesting to me, one, that the debate wasn't between the two nominees for president, but really between President Roosevelt and Charles Lindbergh, who, again, kind of celebrity, kind of astronautist like as a professor pointed out. But the debate was really, what is America's role in the world? And there's all kinds of things that we should be having that conversation about. And whether it's Ukraine, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's tariffs and trades, all of those things have an impact, and they impact us right here at home. And so we kind of got to rethink and think again about what kind of debate can we have in this country, not just on a debate stage. That's the small part. How do we really have a debate so that we don't just keep having presidents of both political parties do and undo executive orders? How do we get Congress to do their job based on a debate that is had about ideas in front of the American people? Something to think about. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. 3 letters. BYU. BYU goes for win number 3.
3, that's a magic number.
BYU is on the road for Game 3.
It's the magic number.
Against the Pokes of Wyoming.
3 times 1.
BYU, Wyoming. Pregame starts Saturday at 5.
That's a magic number.
And kickoff is at 7 on Utah's legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio.
When Dee and I build our new home, and it's almost been 10 years now, I think of all of the appliances that we put in that house, and I cannot tell you how many of them already we have had some major repairs and even replacements. You know the one thing that I haven't given a second thought to? It's the Connecticut soft water system. It is remarkable. We've had 2 systems in 2 different homes, and not once have we ever called with an issue to my friends at Connecticut. It's time for you to call Connecticut. If you're replacing an old system or if you're building a new home, whatever it might be, you will be amazed at how efficient the Connecticut soft water system is. For example, when your neighbor puts in 3 bags of salt in his or her system, you will be putting in only 1. It's remarkable how efficient it is. Give them a call. Great people to do business with. Call Northern Utah's authorized Connecticut dealer at 801-576-8600 or go to softwaterutah.com.
At Common Spirit Health, we know that lifelong health and well-being starts with primary care. So we have doctors and providers who see you, hear you, know you, and understand you. Because understanding you means understanding your needs. And that leads to a deeper knowledge of the prevention, wellness, and treatment options that may be best for you. It's primary care that treats your whole family like family. It's primary care with human kindness. Discover all the ways you can find and connect with a primary care provider at mountain.commonspirit.org.
Discover the best of senior living at Trio Orem and Trio South Ogden. Today's older adults aren't wrapping up their life's journey, they're seeking a new one. And Trio Independent Living is here to help them do just that. With a smart, modern, and connected lifestyle, residents cultivate relationships and maximize independence through signature programs like Prime Fit Wellness that bring living well and well-being to life. Welcome to the new age of senior living. Schedule your visit at leisurecare.com/Utah today.
Paid for by government. Did you hear? A secret hoard of 1932 $10 gold Indian coins have been found. These gorgeous 1932 gold coins are as bright and shiny as the day they were struck, and less than 200 of these gold coins are available. Coin experts are calling the secret U.S. gold coin discovery a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you can own a piece of the hoard. When you call, you are guaranteed a 1932 dated gold coin featuring Lady Liberty with an Indian war headdress and a majestic eagle. With limited availability, you must call now. These 1932 dated gold coins are still in uncirculated condition with brilliant luster. That is 92 years of history you can hold in your hand. To learn more, call 1-800-495-6468. Call now and you'll receive a free bonus over a $55 value free with every order. Call 1-800-495-6468 now to secure your 1932 $10 gold Indian coins before they sell out. Don't wait. You must act fast. Call now.
Attention commercial property managers and business owners. Say snowplow 3 times and who shows up? GoPave Utah. Clearing snow faster than you can say sandworms. That's GoPaveUtah.com.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too. Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Call 1-866-200-0223 or visit alanon.org/help.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Heather Peterson. First, the Utah legislature has filed a petition to overturn the ruling on Amendment D. This is the one that would let the legislature alter the ballot initiatives after they're approved. Second, Pope Francis is telling Americans to vote their conscience come November. He says we'll have to vote for the lesser of 2 evils. And third, Utah firefighters have now contained 2 large fires, the South Willow Fire and the Feedlot Fire. Right now it's 72 and partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
23 years after 9/11, it's an absolute tragedy that the Taliban is the ruling power in Afghanistan. Just last month, they instituted more draconian laws preventing women from speaking in public, requiring full body covers, restricting freedom of movement without a male escort. This comes on top of the crippling poverty that is reeling in the nation. The most disadvantaged people in the country are paying the price for the failed efforts to steer the nation and to foster and fuel democracy. The interesting question now is, how do we help those that are suffering, especially those that were close allies and helpful back during that war? And we want to get under the headlines of all of this, especially as it relates to the Afghan women. Ishan Tharoor, of course, is the foreign affairs columnist for the Washington Post, anchor of today's Worldview, the Post's daily column and newsletter on global politics. And great to have Ishan back on the show. Welcome back.
Good to be with you, Boyd.
So let's start with the Afghan women. We knew what things were like going in. And the thing that always struck me was, one, just what took place over the last 20 years. There was that season where young girls could go to school, where women were starting businesses, they were working in government, and suddenly for that to be wiped away, and now we're back to kind of a draconian rule from the Taliban. Give us your sense in terms of what has happened and what we should be doing next.
Well, it's a long and tragic story, as you said. One of the upshots of the U.S. intervention in 2001, when the U.S. and its allies went into Afghanistan, occupied Afghanistan, drove the Taliban out of power, was that the political dispensation that followed, in fitful starts, encouraged insignificant social reforms, or at least in many cases reversed Taliban-era policy. And yes, you had women in universities and schools. You had liberalization of society in many fronts. You had Afghan women sports teams competing on international formats. You had, progress. And what has been deeply tragic, perhaps very symbolic of the kind of tragedy of Afghanistan, especially the American experience and intervention in Afghanistan, is that those reforms have been completely reversed. The door has been shut again, and the Taliban, whose particular interpretation of Islam and Islamic law is especially regressive, especially fundamentalist, have applied their view of things back onto Afghan society, which is far more complex and diverse and open in many ways than the Taliban pretend it is. And they've instituted laws that are in some interpretations even harsher than what existed more than 2 decades ago.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned in your piece in the Washington Post today, which I thought was just so clarifying, and on one hand you have the United States administration after administration, lots of money going in there in terms of reconstruction, and now we're back to this space where poverty is really rolling through the country. Give us kind of a description in terms of what else is happening inside the country that we should be mindful of.
Well, Afghanistan, of course, at the best of times was never in great shape, but since the Taliban takeover 3 years ago, the regime has been under effective international isolation. No major government recognizes the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. The U.S. has frozen its foreign reserves. There are sanctions on the Taliban regime. And that has precipitated, or that's contributed to, a compounding set of economic crises within the country. Banks collapsed in the wake of the Taliban takeover. People who had public sector jobs just lost their incomes. The situation right now is pretty grim. Half the population, per the latest UN numbers, requires some kind of humanitarian assistance. And this is also kind of a consequence of the downstream effects of the pandemic, but that were felt everywhere in the world in many ways, but especially severe in Afghanistan. And the Taliban, they are firmly ensconced in power. They have their own networks and sources of funding, and their own capacities to govern. But the fact that they are that there is ineffective international isolation in a kind of sad way makes it harder to have any leverage on them to convince them to behave differently.
Yeah, and you mentioned that policymakers are trying to nudge and cajole down different paths. The isolationist approach clearly has not changed or altered behavior in any way. And in some ways, it's also not only not having a lever of power or influence, it's also sort of pushing them closer to China and Russia in terms of where they are in the world. Give us just kind of a look in terms of what that means and what the U.S. ought to be thinking about as it considers policy moving forward.
Yes, and this is something that's going to come to a head for the next administration, if not the current one, because Afghanistan is a deeply strategic and important part of the world. It's a country that is going to be the source of a lot of potential national security risks and threats because of the ways in which other extremist groups, including a version of the Islamic State, prevails there. It sits atop a huge untapped reserve of major precious minerals and rare earths that the Chinese are very eager to cultivate and are essential for, a diversifying 21st century economy that requires these commodities.
Yeah.
And as you said, the Taliban have had unofficial visits to Beijing and Moscow. They will play governments off each other. It is natural for a country like China and for a country like Russia, where Afghanistan is their neighbor in their neighborhood, to have connections to the regime in Kabul. The Arab interlocutors who have contacts with the Taliban regime, who've been talking to them, particularly say the Qataris who had this Taliban office through which the Trump administration negotiated that original deal with the Taliban. They've been saying that we don't really have very much leverage over these guys, and that the guys who we knew, who worked with us, who stayed in Qatar, are not the ones in power right now. And so they're kind of pleading. Their version of events is that the U.S. and the West has to take a more kind of conciliatory approach that will eventually compel the Taliban to move into a more accommodating direction. You talk to Afghan women activists and people in the exiled diaspora, and they say absolutely not. That will only legitimize the terrible, evil things that they're doing right now.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty complicated and difficult situation.
It is, absolutely. And you've done a brilliant job, as you always do, Ishan, in terms of breaking this down and helping us connect the dots. And I love what you just alluded to as you concluded your piece in the Washington Post, saying the struggle of the Afghan women, that they feel like they're in prison, that even breathing has become difficult in Afghanistan. And yet I still have this underlying sense that at some point, when freedom does begin to reemerge in Afghanistan, it will have a very feminine face. Those who have tasted that upward mobility, that education, that opportunity to influence and make a difference, I think the women of Afghanistan are yet to be heard from, despite the current circumstances, and we hope that's the case. Ishan Tharoor, foreign affairs columnist for the Washington Post, anchor of today's Worldview, the Post daily column and newsletter on global politics. And Ishan, we always appreciate you making time for us. Fantastic perspective. We look forward to having you back soon.
Great to be with you again. Thanks, Boyd.
All right, that's Ishan Tharoor. He is the best in the business when it comes to foreign affairs. Great writer and thinker there at the Washington Post. And I do believe when freedom comes ultimately to Afghanistan, it will have a very feminine face. And we'll continue to watch that, and hopefully we're doing things that can support that. We'll be right back.
2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Heather Peterson. KSL's top local story this hour. A Cypress High School student is recovering from serious brain damage after car surfing late Wednesday night in Magna. Unified Police say Ava Broadhead was clinging to the roof of a vehicle as it made sharp turns when she fell off and struck the pavement.
She got flung off and has now suffered a traumatic brain injury, and this left her in a medically induced coma, had to undergo emergency brain surgery late Wednesday night, and we have a very long road of recovery.
Ava's mother, Candace George, shared with KSL TV that since the incident was posted on social media, thousands have reached out, including other parents who revealed their children have also been injured while car surfing. A military court in Congo is sentencing 37 people to death, including 2 Utahns. They were convicted on charges related to taking part in a coup attempt. Marcel Malonga and Tyler Thompson had flown there with Marcel's dad, Christian Malonga, who died while resisting arrest. The defendants have 5 days to appeal the verdict. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Pope Francis is now saying American voters must decide between the lesser of 2 evils when casting their ballots this November. He deemed former President Donald Trump's anti-migrant policies and Vice President Kamala Harris's support of abortion rights as being both against life. He says everyone with a conscience should think about it before they cast their vote. Your money at this moment. We have the Dow up 297, the S&P up 30, the NASDAQ up 114. Coming up, more backups out on the roads this Friday the 13th. KSL emergency traffic is next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
A secure retirement just doesn't happen by accident. When that day comes, what's most important to you? Are you sure to have more money than month? What about unexpected medical costs? Do you want to leave something to the kids or the grandkids? I'm Jeff Jr. from Trajan Wealth, and I want you to know we specialize in these questions and can help make your retirement dream a reality with some of the highest guarantees in the business. Imagine getting up to a guaranteed 12% growth on your retirement income and up to a 30% bonus up front just for opening an account. If you have funds sitting idle in an old 401k or IRA, consider guaranteeing it to secure the peace of mind you deserve. Don't leave your financial security to chance. Take advantage of the highest guarantees I've seen in my career. Call Trajan today at 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600. Or visit us online at TrajanWealth.com.
Annuity guarantees are based on the claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
You know what's great about KSL's traffic coverage? Trained traffic reporters and real listeners.
Trading information and making the commute safer and faster for everyone.
Every 10 minutes on the 9s, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
My name is Dale Pazinski. I volunteer with United Way to help the homeless in my community learn computer skills and build a basic resume. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
All in together now, we can make it better, can we do it? We rope it up, cause we know how to jump.
Moving and eating better every day can help make you and your kids healthier. Search We Can online to find out more. A message from the Ad Council, HHS, and NIH's We Can program.
Emergency traffic brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Some very good news for drivers on northbound I-15. Delays linger as you go from Murray through South Salt Lake, but the crash that caused it all has been cleared prior to 2100 South. All lanes of travel are open. However, we now have emergency traffic in Spanish Fork Canyon. This is on Highway 6 in Utah County. It's experiencing heavy delays in both directions at Soldier Summit. Traffic often at a standstill. You want to consider avoiding it and using an alternate route or delay your travel time if possible until these delays clear out. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, wildlife, excellent dining and shopping await you. Learn more at visitboxeldercounty.com. Sponsored by the Utah Office of Tourism. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Highs will be around 75 today before they jump into the mid-80s this weekend. Then come Monday, we'll see temperatures start to dip and a 60% chance of rain. Right now, it's partly cloudy and 72 degrees. I'm Heather Peterson from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We're continuing to hopscotch across the world as we try to connect the dots and make a lot of the international news make sense. And, of course, as the Israel-Hamas conflict continues to unfold, the world watches for a resolution that seems perpetually out of reach. And despite the clear benefits of a ceasefire, getting the hostages home for both Israelis and Palestinians, complex political dynamics, strategic maneuvering seems to always be thwarting the process. And with lives still hanging in the balance, there's a growing call for a new, more transparent approach to negotiations that could break the deadlock and possibly even pave the way for a lasting peace. And this is one of those things. I saw this piece today. We talked about this as a team here on Inside Sources from the Hill, and we're always looking at how do we think again about what we think we know. And that's a discussion we're going to have about a ceasefire and hostage deal that would require a change, a think again moment. Boaz Atzili is a professor of international relations in the Department of Foreign Policy and Global Security at American University School of International Service. And Professor, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's dive into this. I love the way you approach this, your piece in The Hill, thehill.com. We've had a lot of the back and forth. Really, things have been going at this since October the 7th of last year. You say that we need to maybe think again and look at it in a different framework. How should we go about that?
Right. So since December, since the end of the deal that brought back more than 100 Israeli hostages and brought a ceasefire for about a week, and also Palestinian prisoners released. Since that deal broke down, we are basically talking about the same framework with very little differences over these almost 8 months, more than 8 months.
Yeah.
So, and the kind of interesting stuff about it is that both, as you said at the beginning, both Israelis and Palestinians would benefit from such a deal to materialize, but still it doesn't happen. So, and I can go later on to why I think it doesn't happen, but I think what I suggest in this article that we need to rethink the concept of the framework for the deal, which is a deal in 3 stages. Each of them is subject to negotiation between to reach the next stage. And I think that part of the reason why we don't see a deal is that this complex stages deal or framework allows the people who in decision-making roles that do not want the deal to happen, that have interest in the war to continue, it allows them to manipulate their people on both sides. I think it's actually more on the Israeli side to say basically, I want a deal, but the other side doesn't agree, while actually putting like sticks in the wheels of the deal.
Yeah, and so let's get through that in terms of what that could actually look like. You called in your piece that framework should be the immediate return of all Israeli hostages, those that are alive and those that are not. In return for that, the release of a set number of Palestinian prisoners. Then a long-term ceasefire, including a total withdrawal of Israel Defense Forces from the Gaza Strip, and then, of course, a surge of international aid into Gaza. And so walk us through, you mentioned this in the piece as well, kind of the ambiguity that we've been functioning under, but presenting this in a way where there's no excuses, there's no finger pointing. How do we present that in a way and get those who are brokering this to say, here it is, yes or no, and get to a better solution so we can really see what's going on?
Right. So what we have is a situation where the majority of people, significant majority of people on both sides, want this kind of a deal to happen, right? So in Israel, consistent polls show that more than 60% of population support a deal that will bring back the hostages, even at the price of ending the war and withdrawing from Gaza. And you can also see another sign of that is the huge crowd in the streets. Last weekend, there were 750,000 people that in a country with less than 9 million citizens out in the streets demanding to sign a deal and protesting the government for not doing that. So there's clear majority for this kind of a deal. On the Palestinian side, of course, polls are very difficult to do in the condition of war and occupation. But obviously they suffer tremendously, and the vast majority would want the war to end and the ceasefire. So the majority of people on both sides want it, but the complication of the complexity rather of the current framework allowed again, I think both sides, but in particular Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to manipulate the deal in a way that he adds more conditions. For example, the last one in the list is that Israel has to retain control of the Philadelphia corridor, which is the road that separates the Gaza Strip from Egypt. But there were many other things before, and he plays on this kind of gap between the first stage, which was supposed to be the return of the humanitarian return of some portion of the hostages and a ceasefire, and the eventual deal. So he basically, I think the critical part is that Netanyahu says, I'm not willing to commit to end of the war before I completely annihilate or eradicate Hamas, which is something that will not happen.
Right.
So in practice, that means continuation of the war.
Yeah. Well, this is a brilliant piece, and you write from a most impressive and powerful position. We know that Hamas killed your cousin on October the 7th, still holds his body in Gaza, and that your cousin's wife actually returned home as part of November's exchange deal in this. And so I appreciate you explaining and walking us through this and getting us to a think again moment, to rethink that framework is such a critical thing to moving this forward. Boaz Adzili, a professor of international relations in the Department of Foreign Policy and Global Security at American University School of International Services. Professor, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to continuing.
Can I add one more
please.
quick thing?
Yes.
That it's really important that whenever this new framework is proposed, that it has to be open and in public.
Transparent.
And the role of U.S. and the other mediators is to basically explain this framework to the people on both sides above the head of their leaders, because the leaders are what stands between a deal and no deal.
I'm glad you added that, Professor. That's an important connecting of the dots there, that we need to go above the heads of the leaders and go directly to the people in Gaza and in Israel and get to that better framework and a better solution. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll go ahead and step aside for a quick commercial break. We'll come back with some final thoughts on Inside Sources. We'll be right back.
Winter is coming, but there's still time to replace those drafty old windows before the cold comes and drives up your heating bill. Just make one call and take advantage of the Advanced Window Products Fall Special. $2,500 off on 10 windows or more, and that's $2,500 off their already low factory direct prices, because at Advanced Window Products, they're the factory. Your windows are built in their facility right here in Salt Lake City. You're buying local, and with their lifetime guarantee, you don't ever have to call some faraway state for help. Advanced Window Products is right here, proudly backing up their work. So make one call, save on your heating bill, and get a rebate from the energy companies. Advanced Window Products offers 0% financing. They can even give you amazing new windows with no money down. And don't forget, $2,500 off their factory direct prices, but you have to call now. Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or go to advancedwindows.com.
Beatty, Nevada, your getaway to Death Valley, an entryway to a true desert adventure. Enjoy exciting offerings for all your senses and imagination. In Beatty, visit Eddie World, the largest candy store in Nevada, and visit their historic museum, the ghost town of Rhyolite, and see sculptures in the desert at Goldwell. Hiking, biking, and hundreds of miles of ATV trails await you. For the ultimate adventure, make Beatty, Nevada your next destination and claim a free gift at BeattyNevada.org. Wrangle up some fun at Beatty Days 2024, Friday, October 25th through Sunday, October 27th. It's old-fashioned family fun with a chili cook-off, live music, bed races, a classic car show, cornhole and horseshoe tournaments, model railroads, a parade, food and craft vendors, contests for everyone, and lots more. The fun is in Beatty, Nevada this October 25th through the 27th. Visit BeattyNevada.org for the full schedule. That's BeattyNevada.org.
The Utah RV Super Show, the premier RV event of the year, is back at the Mountain America Expo Center, Thursday, September 12th through Sunday, September 15th. Come see new 2025 models and special closeout pricing on all 2024 models. Bring a can of food for the Utah Food Bank and get $1 off per can, up to half off adult admission. Unplug from distractions and plug in to your family at the Utah RV Super Show. Discount passes at UtahRVSupershow.com.
This year, head to Abravanel Hall for an elevated movie night. Experience your favorite films in concert with action-packed blockbusters, cinematic classics, and animated masterpieces playing on the big screen while the Utah Symphony plays the iconic movie scores live. Grab your tickets now and see the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, or relive the spellbinding magic of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. More at utahsymphony.org/films.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds, which could be life-changing. I mean, you could put that money towards that zero-turn lawnmower you've always wanted. And after using its edge-shaping technology to meticulously sculpt the face of the Mona Lisa into your grass, you'll become the undisputed king of Saturday morning lawn care, leaving your neighbor and sworn enemy Gary to question his place in the delicate neighborhood ecosystem. And it's all because you could save money switching at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states.
Hello? Hey, it's Ted from Consumer Cellular, the guy in the orange sweater, and this is your wake-up call. Did you know we've got you fully covered?
I've taken up beekeeping. I'm always covered.
I'm talking the same fast, reliable nationwide coverage at up to half the cost.
Same honey, half the work?
Exactly.
Sweet.
Just call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com.
Savings based on cost of consumer cellular single line 1, 5, and 10 gig data plans with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon January 2024.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Tim and Amanda.
One of the big differences, I think, between reading a story online and hearing it from us, Tim, is that, you and I are allowed to share a reaction. We need to be able to say, what in the world were they thinking? So that people listening will know. We feel it too. When we read a story that sounds ridiculous, we're right with you. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, we get caught up, I'm sure just like our listeners do sometimes, in death scrolling on social media. And fact-checking it on your own is tough. The great thing about tuning in every morning and starting your morning with us on KSL is you can count on the fact that when that information comes out of the radio in your direction, it comes from reliable sources.
It's already been fact-checked.
Right. And that's not always easy when you're getting it online. Finding who wrote it, when was it written, has it been updated with the current facts of the day that change sometimes minute to minute, not just day to day.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Heather Peterson. First, a Magnatine is in the hospital with serious brain damage after car surfing late last night. Second, 37 people, including 2 Utahns who were involved in a coup attempt in Congo, are being sentenced to death. And third, Pope Francis says American voters will have to choose between the lesser of 2 evils in November. Right now, it's 72 and partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. As we round things out today, of course, we started the day talking about the swamp, lessons that need to be learned there, and actually things that we can ask ourselves as we start trying to decide who we're going to cast votes for on the first Tuesday of November. And a lot of people are weighing in on what you ought to be thinking about before you cast your vote. As you just heard from Heather Peterson, Pope Francis weighed in on what Americans should do today. He was flying back from Singapore on a Singapore Airlines flight and was asked what advice he would give to American voters. He went into an interesting space. He talked about which is the lesser of evil, that woman or that man. He talked about both of them not being pro-life, whether that's dealing with abortion or whether that's dealing with immigrants. He said both are anti-life. But he also said that people need to engage in the process. And the only thing I disagreed with the Pope on, he said, voting your conscience is an important thing. The only thing I disagreed on was that it had to be this or that. In other words, that the only options were Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Those are 2 choices, and I can understand and see how people get to different decisions because, as we've said before, voting is always a series of trade-offs. No candidate for any office is ever going to align with you perfect unless you're voting for yourself. And if you want to do that, that's a good thing. That's all right. But no one's going to be perfect, so you're always evaluating. This is more important than that. I'm willing to accept this. I'm unwilling to accept that. But in the end, if you come up and find that nobody that's printed on the ballot is worthy of your vote, then write somebody in. Vote different. Because voting is ultimately an expression, and what you express matters. We actually saw that this year in a number of places. We saw that in Michigan. Tens of thousands of people did not vote for the sitting president. They voted for something else, not for a specific candidate, just for other. They voted for other. Some wrote names in, and that sent a message. And I think the message was heard by those on the Democratic side of the aisle, that there was some real frustration there, and people were going to vote their conscience, and they couldn't do that for the sitting president. And I think it was part of the dynamics and the calculus that ultimately led to President Biden stepping aside. And so as we look at and assess all of that, I want to round out the program today with something that was in the New York Times today. Fabulous piece. Jamil Bowie wrote, "What really matters as we evaluate those running for the highest office in the land is how presidents think about power." That's a think again moment. Because the interesting thing about the presidency in our constitutional republic is there's a lot of limits to presidential power. And often it's pretty easy for presidents to wonder if they have any power at all. Congress gets to control the purse. They get to decide what gets spent. You have the discretion to execute the law, but that can be curbed by the Supreme Court. And so it's really interesting. You know, we spend a lot of time, and actually we saw in the debate this week that we covered topics at a high level anyway, in terms of the economy and inflation, immigration, border security, and all of those kinds of things. But the missing component that we all ought to think about is how will they actually govern? Governing is the job in the executive branch. How are they going to run it? And so what is their view of power? What do they believe they have power to do? And how will they do that? That's by far the more important question. We've seen presidents of both political parties who believe they have ultimate power. Some say, I have a cell phone and a pen. Others just say, I'm going to just do this all by executive order. And all that does is create uncertainty and a lot of lawsuits that end up in the courts. But asking a question, wouldn't it be refreshing to say, what do you believe the power of the presidency is? What do you think your job is? We have so many people who run for elective office, but they don't want to do the job they're actually elected to do. So rather than just having debates and a lot of commercials about high things that may never get done, that's the other thing we have a problem with in our campaigns, is with divided government, you can pretty much promise anything. Because if it's divided government, the chances of it actually getting done are pretty slim in today's divisive politics. Again, the difference between divisive politics and a divided country are vast. I don't think we're that divided as a country. I think our politics is divided, and those in Congress are deeply divided based on power. So I would want to know that. Let's have a full conversation about the job, the actual job of what power do you have, how will you wield it, and then two more questions that I think are real crucial. This was also part of the New York Times piece. The real question is, how will you use power in situations of immense pressure and crisis? That's an important question, to try to figure out what will they do under extreme pressure in a major situation. What are they going to do with power? Are they going to see it as an opportunity to grab more? Or are they going to look at it as an opportunity to make sure the right things get done to serve the people? And then the other question that's equally important, how will they use power when the pressure's off? You learn so much about a person by observing what they do when they don't have to do anything. I actually believe we're seeing a lot of that as it relates to our entire country. What does a country do when it's so comfortable or so successful broadly that it doesn't have to solve big problems, that it doesn't have to come together, that our communities don't have to come together to fix something or solve something? Because often that's when that muscle of civil society atrophies, when that connection to neighbor and community becomes very, very weak. And so I want to know all of those things. This was a great Think Again piece in the New York Times today. And again, Jamil Bowie did a really nice job of saying, hey, we talk about all of these things about the presidency. The actual powers are few and very limited, but you need to know, how are you going to govern? Because that is the job, especially in the executive branch. How will you govern? How will you use power? What is your view of power? How much do you think you really have, and what will you actually deploy, both in times of crisis, but equally as important, what will you do when the sea is calm and the breeze is light and the sun is out? That will also be telling in terms of how you actually lead. We can have politics and you can win elections, but leading is a completely different matter. That's what we're thinking about today. All right, that wraps it up for us on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. Gorgeous afternoon. It's 73 degrees. KSL's top story. A Cypress High School student is recovering from severe brain injuries after a car surfing accident. KSL News Radio's Eric Cabrera joins us live with the story. Eric.
Jeff, Unified Police say they responded to a report of a teenager hurt and bleeding from her ears around 9 p.m. Wednesday night at Magna Regional Park. Teenage witnesses say Ava Broadhead was car surfing, holding onto the roof of a car while it made sharp turns and was thrown off and hit the pavement. Her mother, Candace George, gave KSL TV an update on her condition.
She got flung off and has now suffered a traumatic brain injury, and this left her in a medically induced coma, had to undergo emergency brain surgery late Wednesday night, and we have a very long road of recovery.
She said Ava's recovery includes relearning basic skills like walking and tying her shoes. Live, Eric Cabrera, KSL News Radio.
Thanks, Eric. KSL News Time 3:01. Well, this didn't take long. An appeal has already been filed to reinstate Amendment D. The Utah Legislative Council has filed a petition with the state Supreme Court asking justices to reverse yesterday's decision. Yesterday, a district judge voided the ballot question because the text is deceptive. You can still vote on Amendment D. It'll be on your ballot, but as things now stand, it won't count. Former President Trump will be making a quick stop in Salt Lake City tomorrow night. Trump Force One will land at Salt Lake Airport for a fast fundraiser. KSL at Night host Adam Gardner says this is a private event and tickets